When you're in a vulnerable position, just getting through each day can feel like a struggle. It doesn't matter if you're out in the world or in the comfort of your own home. For someone like me, who feels weak and exposed, there's no true safe haven. I faced teasing, belittlement, and been treated as a punching bag by those around me. In a way, enduring all this pain became my way of justifying my existence. I waited for a miracle that felt utterly unattainable, bearing the weight of suffering and heartache. But now, I've made a choice to stop waiting, lift my head high, and forge my own path without glancing back. I'm Zoe, 28 years old. For nearly a decade, I've worked in programming, primarily from home. The demand for skilled programmers is always high, so there's more than enough work to wear me out. I manage multiple teams and oversee operations, transforming from the person once seen as the weakest to a leader. Life is truly unpredictable. In my youth, I was ridiculed for being gloomy and introverted, and this mockery didn't just come from my peers, it echoed at home too. My brother, Wesley, especially looked down on me, often mocking me until he left for college after finishing high school, leaving me with a sense of relief. After graduating high school myself, I didn't pursue higher education. Instead, I retreated into my room, as if isolating myself was my way of coping with the decision to forego further studies. For years, I rarely ventured outside, accumulating experience and achievements in my own little world. My mom and Wesley have always been quick to ridicule me, both then and now, but my dad was different. It's hard to understand how he ended up married to someone as harsh as my mom. He was gentle, the kind of person who provided comfort in tough times. I'd often curl up next to him at the pub he ran, crying as I sought solace. "It's okay, Zoe, just hang in there, your luck will turn around," he would say, though I could tell he was trying to convince himself too. The pub, a small establishment on the ground floor of our house, struggled to thrive, often running at a loss. This left my dad unable to stand up to my mom, who had a stable corporate job. The rent for the building was $3,000 a month, a hefty burden. 3 years ago, when my own career started to take off, I took over those rent payments. I'll never forget the look of disbelief on my dad's face when I made the offer. It was the first time I saw him smile like that, tears of gratitude welling in his eyes. To support my dad's business, I threw myself into my work like never before. It was during this time that I truly blossomed as a programmer. My job became my way of repaying my dad, and I found genuine happiness in that role. Sadly, my dad passed away suddenly about 6 months ago from an illness. The ache of his absence still lingers. I can cry endlessly, but I know I can't remain in a constant state of grief. After his death, Wesley returned home. Having always been at odds with our father, he had married a few years back. His wife, Hannah, was a perfect match for his mean-spirited nature, sharp-tongued and cunning. In the absence of Dad, Wesley and Hannah started acting like they owned the place. "Hey, Zoe, still holed up in your room playing with your computer? Creepy." "Oh, that's not nice, Wesley." Poor Zoe. When they started teasing me, my mom joined in, adding her own attacks. Now retired, she spends her days at home, doing nothing but criticizing me. Each time she sees me, she clicks her tongue and mutters that I should just leave. "I wish you had taken Zoe with you, Dad." Every mocking word from Mom and every moment of isolation at home made me feel like there was no reason to stay. I needed to leave as soon as possible, to live for myself, especially now that I had no allies left after Dad's passing. Wesley, Hannah, and even Mom all clicked their tongues at the sight of me, treating me like a ghost. They ignored me completely, even eating their meals separately. My foster mother has always been the one I call Mom, but that's only out of necessity. I barely remember my biological mother, who died in a traffic accident before I was old enough to form memories. The absence of blood ties might explain why both my foster mom and my stepbrother, Wesley, can be so cold toward me. After Dad's death, Wesley and his wife took over the pub. They had always been interested in the food and beverage industry, but without hesitation, they closed down Dad's pub. Then, in a selfish move, they remodeled the place into a cafe. Wesley works weekends while keeping his regular job, and Hannah has taken on the role of manager. To fund the cafe's renovations, Wesley used Dad's inheritance without consulting me. Though I typically keep quiet, that crossed a line. I confronted him, anger boiling over. "That money was meant for me too. How can you use it without even asking? Don't raise your voice, introvert." From that moment on, Wesley's malicious attacks intensified. It became clear they wanted me gone, treating me like an unwanted intruder. "Ugh, just get out. Just looking at you makes me sick. It's like staring at a slug." Of course, Mom chimed in. "Exactly, get out. You're nothing but a nuisance, Zoe." Disgusted by their ignorance and arrogance, I started preparing to move out immediately, hoping they would be miserable without me. I found a nice apartment, signed the lease, and moved my things. I even treated myself to a new computer as a housewarming gift. On my last day at home, I turned to the three of them and said, "From now on, You'll need to handle the rent yourselves. I won't be paying it. Wasn't this place owned by our parents? Wesley replied, his stupidity never ceasing to amaze me. I didn't even feel like laughing. Mom, putting on a brave face, pretended not to care. The rent is $3,000 a month. I hope the cafe sales can cover it. Wait, Zoe, you were paying $3,000 a month? Seeing Wesley's shock, I decided it was time to enlighten them. Over the past decade, I had started my own programming company, now employing around 40 skilled programmers. I had successfully led various projects, and for me, paying $3,000 a month was a drop in the bucket. My plan was to expand my business from my new apartment, turning this move into a fresh opportunity. As I finished, Wesley put on a forced smile and began to clap. I didn't know that. Impressive. Zoe, you can stay here. What? Don't leave. You can stay here, just like before, right, Mom? Caught off guard, Mom nodded in surprise. Yes, Wesley's right. No need for you to leave. Wow, Zoe, I'm impressed. I've changed my mind about you. They had completely flipped their tune. Realizing my financial stability made me more valuable to them, but it was too late for their flattery. I picked up my last bag and stood up. How foolish. Just so you know, I won't be helping out. Goodbye. Despite their desperate attempts to hold me back, I walked out the door. I started my new life in a spacious apartment, working by a bright window with a cup of coffee in hand. No one complained. Whenever I wanted a change of scenery, I could head to a nearby cafe. With my newfound freedom, I gradually transformed my life. I began wearing clothes I loved and changed my hairstyle. I explored places and items that piqued my interest. My team members noticed the change, remarking on how my voice sounded brighter during meetings, an improvement from the low, somber tone I had once carried. It seemed my positive changes were contagious, lifting the spirits of my employees as well. Meanwhile, Wesley kept calling. I ignored him, but soon my foster mom started calling too. I could have easily blocked them. I had no attachment to the three of them, but I didn't cut ties completely, allowing myself a little payback. On days when I felt particularly down, I'd answer Wesley's calls, relishing his attempts to win me back. His overly flattering tone was almost entertaining. Mom was just as eager to appease me. Please, let the past be the past, she would say in a syrupy voice. I listened to their pleas only to reject them firmly in the end. Why would I willingly return to live with the three people I despised most in the world? Now, the tables had completely turned, and I found their reactions when I rebuffed them utterly amusing. I meticulously plotted my revenge, replaying every cruel moment they had inflicted upon me. Talking to Wesley revealed much. He and Hannah were buried in debt, largely due to Wesley's gambling addiction, which he had downplayed to Hannah, a truly deceitful act. He had succumbed to gambling during his college years, while Hannah, uninterested in such vices, was obsessed with shopping. According to Wesley, her wardrobe was so vast it could stock a boutique. She spent hours browsing online, buying anything that caught her fancy, regardless of their income. It was never sufficient, a truly pitiful situation. Yet, even in their financial ruin, they continued their extravagant lifestyle, leaving me utterly perplexed. From my mom, I learned more about Hannah. Despite sharing a home, she rarely lifted a finger to help with chores. She only washed her own clothes, leaving everything else to my mother. Cleaning, cooking, and tidying were chores she avoided unless explicitly instructed. Just picturing the tension in my parents' home was enough to sadden me. Meanwhile, the cafe was struggling, always operating at a loss. It usually takes a cafe 6 months to a year to establish itself, yet the funds miraculously acquired from a bank loan vanished within 3 months. They should have set aside at least 6 months' worth of operating costs. With so few customers, the atmosphere at home grew increasingly strained. Mom mentioned that Wesley and Hannah's marriage was on the brink of collapse, but that was not my concern. Just support Wesley. Then, I replied coldly before hanging up. Mom kept calling, begging me to come back. After all the insults, now they wanted to act as if nothing had happened. The audacity. Recently, Mom had been tugging at my heartstrings, lamenting that, in her 60s, she was in constant pain and struggling with daily chores. When I asked if she meant I should return to help with the housework, she outright denied it. For her, just having me, her close daughter, nearby was comforting enough. She claimed it sufficed if I were present and helped out occasionally. It was evident she was after my money, and I had no intention of believing her. What truly irked me was her invoking memories of Dad. Your father was kind. He must be pitying me now. Zoe, you're just like him, so kind. You wouldn't abandon your family. But bringing up Dad had the opposite effect. I remembered his suffering because of Mom, a failure running an unprofitable shop. How many times had I heard him labeled as such? Mom, who once derided me, now had no choice but to sing my praises. If Dad were watching, he would surely be laughing at her. If he felt pity, it would be for her shortcomings. I later told Wesley that Mom had been badmouthing Hannah extensively at my parents' home. A clash between Mom and Hannah ensued, with Mom now calling Hannah a moocher. Caught in the middle, Wesley seemed to be in a precarious position. 2 months later, Hannah's indiscretion surfaced. A man had approached her while she was alone at the cafe. With the business struggling and her relationship with her mother-in-law deteriorating, she succumbed to temptation during a moment of vulnerability. Naturally, Wesley was furious upon discovering this. In a rational world, they would have had a mature discussion about their future, but foolish Wesley chose revenge. He, too, had an affair. Both placed blame on each other, leading to a massive argument. The conflict escalated until a glass ornament thrown by Hannah struck Mom's foot, leaving her with a broken leg that would take months to heal, confining her to bed and preventing her from doing housework. Feeling a sense of guilt, Hannah began to take on household duties, but her lack of experience resulted in inevitable mistakes. While minor slip-ups should have been overlooked, Mom seized the opportunity to harass her, criticizing her efficiency and the overly salty meals. Frustrated and overwhelmed, Hannah contemplated giving up, her stress mounting. Anger towards Wesley for his infidelity and herself for injuring her mother-in-law consumed her. Unable to discuss divorce due to her obligation to care for her injured mother-in-law, Hannah's mental state began to deteriorate. Wesley claimed she was now in a state of depression. Wesley faced severe repercussions for his vengeful affair. The partner of his fling harbored deep resentment, persistently bombarding his home and workplace with harassing calls. Ultimately, Wesley had no choice but to leave his job, unable to endure the relentless stress. The fallout from the affair plunged him deeper into debt, and with no steady job in sight, he resorted to part-time work, warehouse logistics, cleaning, moving, and delivery. He was trying his hand at anything feasible. Despite the exhaustion, he claimed it was preferable to being at home. The pain of facing Hannah and enduring Mom's piercing glares was unbearable. Working outside felt like a welcome escape. Once filled with the chaos of fights between couples and the tension of mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts, the house had transformed into an eerie silence. As no one was willing to speak, Mom avoided the sight of Wesley and Hannah altogether. Hannah steered clear of her mother-in-law, while Wesley felt increasingly awkward around both women. This uncomfortable dynamic defined their existence together. They cohabited in a state of mutual avoidance, creating an atmosphere that was nothing short of hellish, which I found deeply unsettling. During our phone conversations, Wesley shared these stories, ultimately asking me for money at the end of the call. Naturally, I refused. Lending them money would only foster their dependency, and I had no desire to be part of that. I understood that relationships built on financial support dissolve when the money disappears, so I was determined to sever those ties. Wesley mentioned he would call again, but I promptly blocked his number. I did the same with Mom's. I never saved Hannah's number, and since I don't answer calls from unknown or private numbers, I felt safe from further contact. Eventually, the three of them were unable to pay rent and dispersed. Mom relocated to a retirement home, and Wesley and Hannah divorced. Rumor had it that the building already had new tenants. While Wesley and Hannah's whereabouts remained a mystery, they were likely living modestly somewhere, gradually working to pay off their debts. As for me, I continued to relish my comfortable, solitary life. Work was going smoothly, and I enjoyed a good rapport with my colleagues. Everything felt perfect, though perhaps a new chapter was on the horizon. A coworker introduced me to a man, and I agreed to go on a date with him. He's a young entrepreneur, and there's something captivating about the way his eyes light up when he talks about work, a truly charming individual. Until now, I had focused solely on my career, steering clear of dating. It seemed my single life was nearing its end.